everybody. How are you? Welcome and welcome back. Welcome to Impossible Live. I'm delighted you're joining us today, whether you're joining us live or you're checking us out later in a replay. And hmm, I hope you're having a magnificent day. I am so excited at today's guest. You have no idea. And I know we've got another interesting title, which we'll talk about in a little bit after we get to know Denice a little bit better. But one of the cool parts is that I'm delighted to have met Denice through the journey on positive intelligence. And that wouldn't have happened. Nathan of PQ, I'm telling you, smiles across the miles and gratitude. Nathan of Positive Intelligence invited me to join him for a coach spotlight. I'm a relatively new positive intelligence coach, and I'm delighted we have Denice here today because she is a certified positive intelligence coach. And many of us, you'll hear us talk about it as mental fitness through positive intelligence. But one of the delightful things was Nathan, in a very short interview for the spotlight, and I appreciate him because he was my welcome to positive intelligence coaching. I showed up for a session, and there's this man with an amazing smile and fabulous energy. And when he interviewed me, I ended up sharing something I don't normally share. I had never said it out loud. And I really appreciate Denice because Denice not only read the Positive Intelligence newsletter from October, but Denice then reached out in response to the interview. So, Denice, I'm delighted to have met you because of 11 delicious minutes with Nathan. So warm welcome, and please let everybody know a little bit about you.
Mel, thank you so much for inviting me onto your LinkedIn Live I'm Possible today. I really appreciate it. I think that inclusive leaders take responsibility for connecting and communicating positively to inspire their and others' success. And so I'm all about helping leaders really inspire themselves and others, because that's what the hard work of leaders is. And I really I work in the nonprofit sector with nonprofit organizations, primarily affordable housing organizations and organizations supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and other kinds of disabilities to live independently as possible. So my focus is helping those leaders in those organizations have a really rewarding and joy-filled experience in their work as often as they can.
That is pretty deep. You do a lot of other things too.
Well, that's true. I mean, we help leaders and teams build trusting conversations, and we cultivate inclusive organizational cultures, and we have done a lot of strategic planning over the years too.
That's fantastic. You've also have some amazing certifications. I'm constantly blown away with those as I'm in the process of pursuing my first certification. So what are some of your certifications?
Oh, thank you for asking. Well, I think the one that I'm most proud of, well, I'm proud of all of them, but the one that feels really important to me is my Master Certified Coach credential, MCC credential from the International Coach Federation. It took me 13 years to put in place all the pieces to earn that, and I completed that in May of 2021. And I also have certifications, as you mentioned, in positive intelligence and conversational intelligence and energy leadership. I'm a master practitioner. These are different frameworks, coaching frameworks that have a basis in neuroscience. And I really love to work with them, with our clients.
Well, I have to thank you for your love for neuroscience because I've had one for years. It probably started as a kid. I was the kid with migraines. I didn't realize it. And I was always fascinated by how, teacher's kid, daughter of a scholar, always fascinated by how our brains worked, And hey, Lachelle, how are you? Wonderful. And thank you so much for joining us today. So, Denice, Let's start with the juicy. Let's try the easier question because we can go deep, and I love that about our conversations. What does common ground mean?
Well, I thought I would give you a definition that I like, and then I thought I would pitch it back to you and see what else you would like to add. Is that okay?
Sounds perfect.
Okay. Well, I think that building common ground means creating shared understanding, mutual respect, and a foundation for productive communication between individuals or groups with different perspectives, backgrounds, or interests. And it involves finding points of agreement or shared values and using those as a basis for building relationships and working toward common goals. I like to think of building common ground actually as bridge building that helps reduce divides, reduce conflicts, and foster cooperation and mutual understanding. But, people that actually reach common ground don't have to do everything exactly the same or believe actually the same things. It's about creating shared understanding from different perspectives. So that's how I think about it. What about you?
I love the part you're saying about the different perspectives because we're coming from so many different cultures. We have so many different backgrounds, so many different environments in which we function, whether they're personal, whether they're professional, whether they're, in education, in our school systems, or in in our religious institutions and in our communities. I think it can really get kind of complex. I love what you said about the foundation part. And I also love what you said about the shared part, because I think sometimes in our, and I will always call it our fragile world, because I think there are elements we need to work together to repair. But in our world, there are so many places sometimes where we're not always feeling totally aware. We're self-aware sometimes, but then sometimes you're in a situation where something happens emotionally. It may be something that happened in the past or that happens to the present that kind of can shake our core. So I love what you said about foundations, that if there's a way to create them so that it supports us all living our best lives or being able to be our best selves. I think I love that part, especially about what you're saying about foundations. We forget that sometimes. We don't always, in the process of creating common ground, we don't always feel like we're on solid ground.
You're absolutely right about that. I really love what you're saying there. And getting on that solid ground, really means taking the time to, so I work at the kind of organization and team level, and getting on solid ground at that level means getting to know everybody and actually sharing core values or creating core values that might guide a team if those don't exist. And a lot of what I find is very often organizations and teams forget to do that because they're so focused on doing the work of their organization and the busyness of the day that they forget to stop and think about what actually does create common ground for them.
I think it's wonderful. And Louisa, thank you for joining us. Louisa of Maximizing Cultural Differences is joining us, and she's saying, as someone who considers herself a bridge builder, I love your approach to shared understanding, even across differences.
Yeah, thank you so much, Louisa, and it's so nice to meet you. I really think that we get afraid. It's really easy to be afraid of differences. And, I know for myself, that's sort of a growing area for me continuously, is because I grew up at a time and in a place where it wasn't good to speak about out loud what you were afraid of, and I think today, and we're not really hardwired as humans the way our brains work. We don't like being afraid. It triggers a lot of negativity, a lot of self-judgment. It also triggers us to, and I don't even like the word triggers. I'm working on finding a better word than that. It stimulates negative feelings for ourselves and negative feelings in others. This fear, we fear we're going to make mistakes. We fear something's going to be said that's going to offend someone, so forth. And so I think that in learning to develop a shared understanding, we have to develop that strength in ourselves to be okay with different perspectives and to keep opening, as 𝗲𝗏𝗁𝗁𝗁 said in her work in conversational intelligence, double clicking, which means keep open. When you double click on a mouse, you keep opening perspective. So what 𝗲𝗏𝗁𝗁𝗁 meant was, when there's something that comes up that you're a little bit unclear about or unsure about, keep double clicking and keep asking the person that you're communicating with to tell you more and explain their perspective without a negative judgment about what they're saying.
Wow, I love that. I really, really love that. I think also I share your response to the word triggers from the perspective of now as a mental fitness coach, and in a world sometimes that can feel full of microaggressions, where we each have perhaps generational experiences that create the need for generational healing. And some feel as trauma survivors, or based on our experiences. I'm delighted to be on the board of Fearless Hudson Valley, which addresses and does advocacy for people affected by intimate partner violence, by crimes, victims of human trafficking, and also approaches the intersections. One of the things that I think I'm starting to do and explore, because you and I had a conversation way back when about that word triggers, it reminds me of loaded weapons. And I think for myself, I'm starting to explore the word stimulants, because there's something that touches us in a way, and we're not necessarily sure when it happens to us what the effect could be in somebody else. We're not really sure emotionally in many situations where people are coming from, or what they're carrying in hidden baggage. And I know we'll talk more about that in terms of our saboteurs, but I think that word stimulants, it's I think of it from a building relations perspective. We want to invigorate stuff. I'm always talking about illuminate. How do we light stuff up? But I think sometimes the stimulants are that something's coming in, and the person on the other end may need more time to process something you've said, something they've heard, something they've seen, something they feel, and just to allow each other that time. I was delighted to be on Robbie Samuels. He's got an amazing book that's coming out about Zoom and improving the quality and the impact of the Zoom rooms that we run virtually. And in his great training, I really appreciated it last week, and I'll find the name of it as well as the name of his amazing book that's now on Amazon. And he'll laugh. Hey, Robbie, I'm taking book launch promotion to a new level. I'll have to tease him about that later. But one of the things that I love was during our session, he created pause breaks. They were opportunities for us to catch up on our notes, take a little breath, maybe look at something that was in chat, maybe write something that was in chat, maybe just to take a moment to kind of decompress. And I think those pauses, as you're saying, whether we're doing it personally because sometimes we don't have time, or you're in a real uh, public place. My love is a retired first responder. You don't always have the time or the privacy that you need to take a second back. But I loved it because in his presentation, he put a pause slide. It's just like extra time to digest or process. And I think, in the old days, we used to joke about, people would gather around the water coolers, and your boss didn't want you there. Or I remember an early job where they gave us a timesheet and they were trying to track the time to do stuff. And somebody came up to me and they said, "You're the part timer. You're a little bit," this person said, "You're 20 years younger than me. They're setting the time I have to work based on your productivity." It was such a reminder of what we can't see, and a reminder to just pause. She teased me because at the time I was smoking cigarettes. She says, "In the middle of one of the things you're doing, could you go take a cigarette break? And then when you come back, could you write that as your ending time?" And Catherine, who has a podcast, Time for What Matters, will be laughing behind the scenes in it. But it was that consciousness. And I know, once again, we're talking about a lot, but your deep words are really reminding me. But I love what you said about core values. I think one of the things to help create common ground, and I just learned a new way to look at this term from hanging around with 𝗰𝗶𝗶𝗆 of organizational soul in her trust style inventory certification. And as part of the trust assessments and the tools that they use, Yvette's helped me identify the reminder of shared values. And it's hard because in terms of organizations, we think of it in common values, or helping them build them if they don't, have them culturally as part of the organizational map, so that others kind of feel that sense of belonging or a deeper sense of connection. And I love, and Cindy, thank you so much for your comment about, I love the pause idea. It's a way to be intentional about refocusing, processing, taking a couple of deep breaths.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Cindy. And Mel, thanks for all that you were saying about kind of creating space for, developing understanding and tying core values into that. In our work, we often create the space for people to tell stories about their experience in their organization, and we help them listen for where the values show up in the stories. And we've done this a number of times, but after you sit in a room and have 10 or 15 people tell stories from their experience, and then you sort of step back and you ask the group, what are the values that they hear in the stories? That begins to be a way to create a shared understanding. So that's one of the ways that we encourage organizations and teams to think about their core values and then identify them. And there's some other steps as well, but once they have them, then we encourage them to keep thinking about on a regular basis, how are you living out those values in the way that you're doing your work, in the way that you're, in the language that you're choosing, as we were talking about language and the word trigger and the word stimulant, Judith Glaser said, words create worlds. And it's really true that the words that we hear stimulate our mind to think about things in different ways. And so if we want an environment that is really engaging and welcoming and nonviolent, it's important to think about the words that we use to express our core values and the stories that we tell, because that that helps build that common ground, that place of understanding.
I so love that, because you're really reminding us that, the active deep listening is such a critical part of it. I think part of it, and, as we were talking about it, and I was laughing, I'm about to change my LinkedIn banner. So my current LinkedIn banner refers to building living bridges. And people are like, what in the world do you mean building living bridges? And I wanted to help others build bridges where we could kind of connect. We knew they're alive, they're fluid. We show up fully present, almost as if we're lending a hand to the person who's next to us, or near us, or climbing up, or in some cases descending, or just moving. But I think one of the things that I thought with it that might be helpful was, hopefully we're trying to build relationships, and whether we're trying to build relationships with community members, with peers, with other board members, with volunteers, with sponsors. And I think of it kind of, from the event space. And for years I've helped people, kind of create conversations around events and presentations, because sometimes somebody's not responding to your extended hand to shake your hand, or they're not responding to your smile. And just that reminder of something we discovered in a previous live, we don't always have awareness, self-awareness, mutual awareness of where others are coming from. We're not always present. And I love it because Echo Sullivan, another certified PQ coach, reminded us to think of presence as notice. So it's kind of your observation mode. But another part of that is the respect part. And I love it because you're reminding us of the shared. We hope in cultures there's shared respect, there's self-respect, there's mutual respect. But sometimes all these ingredients aren't always there, 24/7 in many cultures, as well as our world. And I love that you have such great experience trying to help organizations build safe spaces, safe places, and to build bridges. Is there an organization that you loved working with that really did a great job of creating the safety while trying to build a bridge?
Wow. I wasn't expecting that question. Let me give that some thought here. We have so many great clients. One that comes to mind, right off the bat today, is an organization called Wesley Housing that builds affordable housing in the greater Washington, D.C. area, Northern Virginia, greater Washington, D.C. area. And they offer residential services as well, and property management services. And they have over 2,000 units of affordable housing. And, it's taken, in the last 15 years, they just actually went through a really successful leadership transition that we helped them with. We helped them bring their CEO on board 15 years ago, who grew the organization and recently retired, and they have a new CEO now who came from inside the organization. And I think, one of their commitments over the last 15 years, well, since they were created in more than 40 years ago now, has really been to engage in their communities, listen really carefully to what their communities are saying, and to create programs and engage partners in what the residents in their communities really need. And I just think they've done a wonderful job over the years of really doing that. And about 5 or 6 years ago, we helped them through a strategic planning process, and they really solidified a set of core values and kind of refreshed their mission statement in a way that prepared them to go through a successful leadership transition that they just recently accomplished. So I think the work of building common ground is important inside an organization, but your community outside your organization experiences what you have to offer as an organization, experiences that externally as well.
Thank you so much, Denice. Wow, sorry to put you on the spot, but boy, that was such a rich, juicy answer. And thank you, Echo and Nathan, for joining us also. And it can be really, really complex. So I thank you for reminding us, especially from an organizational perspective, to do it, with an eye towards succession, what comes next in terms of leadership or an organization's future, or as organizations are working on new strategic plans or about to celebrate milestones.
Well, I can share one more with you. Actually, was thinking about talking about them as well. So this is an organization in Maryland, Silver Spring, Maryland, that just recently, actually last week, announced their new name and brand. So their new name is 𝗰𝗄𝗹𝘁𝗂𝗏, formerly 𝗊𝗫𝗃. And what isn't changing about 𝗰𝗄𝗹𝗁 is a set of core values that they adopted a number of years ago. We helped them think about this. And their core values are everybody matters, unlimited options, empowering engagement, better together, and shared leadership. This is an organization that supports individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities to live meaningful lives in the communities of their choosing. And this idea of everybody matters, unlimited options, empowering engagement, better together, and shared leadership is how they operate internally, but also how is the framework of questions they ask themselves as they're thinking about the programs and the supports that they're putting in place for the individuals that they're working with. So it's a way for them to build common ground inside their organization, but it's also a way for them to really fulfill the promise of their mission outside the organization as well.
I absolutely love that. You reminded me, as we're talking about, ways to create common ground. There are some people who this has been their life's work. And I know, and I don't want to butcher her last name, but the trailblazer and the advocate for disability rights that Judy just passed away recently. And, it's such a reminder as you're doing this, that part of the work, whether we're doing it personally or professionally, really creating a legacy for others, creating roadmaps for them, to kind of blaze new trails. And in many cases, create really positive experiences, as well as generations of change agents. We could always use a bit of that spiciness in our daily lives. I love it as we're talking about it, Denice. We talked about so many different elements of what is part of the foundation of building common ground. What do you think are there any elements of the foundation that we're missing in our discussion?
Well, I in preparing for today, I thought about, there are a lot of different frameworks, but one that I really like a lot is Timothy Clark's work on the 4 stages of psychological safety. And the 4 stages, I'll just briefly share each of them and give you an example. But first, we have to feel included in an organization or a group or a team. So we just have to feel like we belong there. In other words, like you're welcomed or invited in to be part of something, and you're continuously and positively affirmed as a member of that group. And, you know, when you join a LinkedIn group, for example, you become a member of that group. But then if you start communicating and participating in that group and you feel welcomed by the group, that's just the first step of, of being included. So that's stage one. To be included in a group, in an organization, it means to really understand the mission, or again, it means to understand the audience the organization is working with, or its core values. To understand the change that the organization wants to make in the world. You have to have like a basis for the understanding, of why we're coming together. That creates that initial foundation. Then Timothy Clark talks about the second stage as feeling safe to learn in that group or team. So it has to feel safe to get into discovery of asking questions, experimenting, making mistakes, and feeling like that you have enough support to recover from those mistakes. So like, for example, when we work on a committee or in a professional community of practice, and we're actively participating, starting to participate in the work of the organization or the community that we're in, we get a little bit more comfortable and we feel like we can expand the conversation. An organization's core values are especially important in that learning phase, because the core values often give you a way to begin to participate in the conversation. The third stage is being able to contribute to the team by playing your role. So, if it's your job, having the opportunity actually to do the work of your job and feeling like you can bring your expertise to it, and also learn from others and grow from their expertise. That's what the third stage is called, contribution safety. But you feel, now you're much more embedded in the organization or the team, and there's a level of comfort there to really contribute. And the final stage of safety is that you can challenge the status quo without retribution, reprisal, or the risk of damaging your position or your reputation. So, for example, after 4 years as a member of a professional association and being elected to its statewide board of directors here in California, I finally felt safe enough to ask why the organization, as a statewide organization, had very few people of color belonging to the organization. And would the organization be willing to look at that? But it took me a long time to get comfortable to speak about what I had been noticing for a long time. And the timing of it turned out to be really welcomed, because they said yes, they were willing. And today, a couple of years later now, that organization has a permanent DEI committee, a diversity, equity, inclusion committee, a plan that we're all working on, and many, many more people of color are beginning to be present among the organization's membership. But I would have never felt comfortable at that, asking that question, had I not felt comfortable at all of the other stages. It takes time.
It really does. And in many cases, it takes a village. Thank you so much for sharing, Timothy Clark. I'm going to have to look up the 4 stages of psychological safety. I didn't realize until last year, I think. I didn't say it often. I had plenty of trust issues and plenty of issues and concerns about safety. I think the pandemic kind of heightened that. We're watching our parents age in place, very grateful for every moment, but the real reminder of the importance of safety, I never used to mention that walking into the door. It was something, if someone had a survey or someone did an exit interview, it was something that I would mention on walking out of the door or leaving the organization. So I really want to thank you for the reminder to kind of create a place for discussions about safety. I had no idea how important it was to me in terms of building an building building structures, building relationships. Um, it's interesting. And Henry, thank you for your comment. You're reminding us, uh, Planet Fitness motto is a judgment-free zone. But as mental fitness coaches, we know our judge is always in the building. And as coaches, that breathing in to try and not uh, let that judge out to play, to cause a family reunion of saboteurs, is another thing. We have some other really great comments to share. I think a couple of other things are in terms of the foundation of building common ground or creating safe spaces. I think we have to cultivate them. We have to show up, ready to nourish and feed an environment, hopefully with positivity, and really show up and encourage deep and active listening. And when it's possible, try and check our attitudes and our egos, and be aware of unconscious bias when we're entering, these sacred safe spaces. Denice, yep, what were you about
Well,
to say?
Mel, what I was going to say was I so appreciate you bringing up, the idea of the judge, the inner critic within us that judges us, and that we use to judge others, right? And it's such a natural part of who we are. Our brain is hardwired for that behavior. That there's a natural skepticism inside most of us, and unless we actually, so one of the transformational things for me about 15 or 16 years ago when I first became a coach was actually beginning to understand that inner critic. I thought I was a really, really positive person. And I was so shocked when I took something called the Energy Leadership Index through 𝗲𝗃 coaching and Bruce Schneider's work on energy leadership. I was so surprised to learn that I wasn't really very positive at all. In fact, most of the time I was living in a very kind of angry space in my head, judging myself, but also judging other people. I may not have been saying it out loud, but there was just a lot of negative judgment. And so one of the things I thought about suggesting today from Bruce Schneider's work, so he just recently came out with the second edition of his book. It was published in the fall of 2022. So it's called the 7-Level Framework for Mastery in Life and Business Energy Leadership. Is to just spend a week creating a judgment journal for yourself, and just spend the week noticing every time you have an interaction with someone, what do you judge negatively about that interaction? What's been said that brings up the inner critic in yourself, and what are you thinking about that other person? Maybe, again, not saying to them, but just noticing that for yourself. The awareness of our judge starts to raise opportunities to get control of it.
I really, really appreciate that. And especially as you're saying, from an awareness perspective, I was delighted, in the process of working with Yvette on trust style inventory. And my first certification is that in the process of looking a little bit at not just the positive intelligence, but adding more of the emotional intelligence, which I've
Mhm.
always sat in workshops, but I never really did a deep dive. So hanging around with Yvette in her certification community has given an opportunity to really help address emotional mastery, the reminder of the resources we need personally in uh, in our cultures and in organizations to kind of help us work on elements of emotional mastery and really help us understand the effect that some of our emotions and our behaviors and things that are happening, really just how they affect others. It's been a really rich journey because I started exploring trust because I'm mentioning trust in the first module of my first beta course, which is creating connections to scale. And I was mentioning trust, and I wanted an assessment that kind of could help measure trust without making people feel creeped out. But I appreciate it's reminding me in the process, just like we have opportunities to show up in different spaces and to show up hopefully as our best selves. We have opportunities to show up
Well, I
and
think the thing to remember is that while while you and I have inner critics, everybody and emotions and a whole range of emotions, everybody else does too. That's what makes us, so beautifully human. And again, folks that know me 10 or 15 years ago, if somebody said something to me that felt uncomfortable, I would be a wreck for days, and as a leader, that just isn't a really productive way to be. You've got to be able to recognize the emotions that you're having and recover from them quickly. As 𝗲𝗏𝗁𝗁 in positive intelligence talks about, it's like putting your hand on the hot stove, but then taking your hand off quickly. And as you're saying about emotional intelligence, being aware of our, as leaders, being aware of our emotions first, then enables us to be a little bit more sensitive to the emotions that other people are having, to not take them so personally, and to use them as a way to explore and have a discovery, more conversation, to start building that common ground.
Echo is helping us also with a wonderful comment that as the two of you, and I really appreciate it. Echo is reminding us having a place to recover almost and to be accountable as part of that culture, because sometimes we can discuss these changes, and it doesn't seem like the needle's moving or there's a lot of traction. And so creating, besides creating common ground, creating the safe space to process what's happening for an organization, for an individual. And I really love all the gems you're sharing today. Denice, what would you like? What are great ways for our guests to stay in touch with you so they can get more Denice gems and keep? I'm ready to be part of the Denice book club. So when you're ready, I'm there. You let me know.
I appreciate that, Mel. Uh, well, so everyone can connect with me on LinkedIn. Look me up, Denice Hinden. It should be pretty easy to find me. My email address is drhinden@managance.com, managance.com. Managance, by the way, is the first half of the word management and the last half of the word performance, if anybody's wondering where that came from. And I look forward to connecting with anyone on LinkedIn and continuing the conversation.
Well, really, we want to thank you for joining us today, and thank you for lighting up our Monday, and thank you for really helping to ignite some new trails in the positive intelligence world for me. I greatly appreciate you. And Catherine's got a great link here for Denice's leadership mindset gauge. So definitely uh, check Denice out, stay in touch, and find great ways to support her content. And I'm serious. I'm going to keep reminding you of the book club, probably on a very regular basis. And Louisa's thanking you for sharing wisdom. Thank you, Louisa, for really for your tremendous support. And Nathan, thank you so much to pop in to share ideas. And Nathan, we've got to find a good day for you to come in and pop and join us on Impossible Live. I'm loving this being surrounded by certified positive intelligence coaches. As I'm working on my first certification, you're inspiring me, but reminding me, allow more space in between pursuing certifications. Denice saying one took 15 years. I really want to thank you for the reminder. Space them out, live a little, breathe a little. But I'd love to just thank you all for joining us today, whether you're joining us live or on a replay. And really, stay safe, stay well, stay inspired, stay in touch. And I hope you all have a magnificent day. Thank you so much, Denice, for joining us.
Thanks again for having me, Mel. It was a real pleasure.
Truly our pleasure. Thanks for joining us at Impossible Live. Take great care.